I thought we'd first start a little bit around the landscape of use cases in the enterprise. From what I've seen, there are kind of 4 categories of how enterprises today are treating mobile devices. And some of them have their heads in the sand on what they need to manage, by the way, okay, and I think that's a pretty common outcome. But let me describe the 4 scenarios, and then I'd like to have a panel discussion on these topics, what we see. So one of them is the traditional entirely corporate-owned device, where a corporation buys the smartphone or tablet, gives it to the employee, and they totally manage what they can do on it. In my experience, that's becoming less and less. I mean, you still hear about use cases like that if you visit the Pentagon, and talk with the armed forces, very strict security kinds of aspects. More common is a new acronym called COPE, which is around corporate-owned but personally enabled. And this is really how people were using BlackBerries for years. The corporation is paying for the device, they're giving it to the employee, but the employee is activating it, and they have an expectation of being able to reasonably do things with that device and make it their own, use personal aspects. Big buzzword for category 3 is bring your own device, okay, which is all about employees buying their own devices, bringing it in, using them for work, as well as using it for their personal life. And in the BYOD world, okay, whether you have a stipend for your employee or the employee is paying for it entirely on their own, they expect to be able to do whatever they want with that device. They do not expect it to be locked down by IT. And that can be a source of conflict when we talk about MDM and MAM. And the last category is completely unmanaged devices, which is people bringing devices into the enterprise, using them as they see fit, and IT turning a blind eye. So what I hear from customers is very much the BYOD and the COPE scenarios are the really common scenarios, probably a good 90% of the market. I'd like to ask the panel here, does this match what you guys are seeing? Okay, and how do you view these categories? Maybe start with Chris?
Sure. Yeah, so we do a quarterly survey of around 1,500 companies within the U.S., and we found that within the last couple of years, around 35 to 40% of companies are still planning to buy smartphones for their employees, so that kind of corporate-owned or corporate-owned, personally enabled model. But then we also ask them, are you supporting BYOD, and which devices, which roles within the company are you allowing? And we find that about 69% of companies are supporting BYOD, and whether that's they have a specific policy about who can bring in devices, all the way to, we really don't have any policies in place, and obviously that's becoming a smaller component, and we even have a component within that question of, IT, that IT person doesn't know, so the company really hasn't voiced what their policy is around the device, and so if there is no policy, then obviously people are out there running around with their device doing what they want. And then we also ask them what are the applications that they have on those devices, on those BYOD devices, and you see more than a quarter are allowing, more yet. So 65% are allowing corporate email on those devices, and then more than a third are allowing access to corporate data through applications on those devices.
Suzanne, would you like to comment on this topic from what you see as a CIO or quasi-CIO?
Of course, our answer always is it depends. Any employee can request and receive a smartphone or a tablet at this particular point in time, but they're also welcome to bring their own device as long as it will comply with a basic set of policies that we lay down, specifically through ActiveSync with Exchange. So we have a criteria. We are in scope for PCI compliance, and we do need to be able to remote wipe the device. So we do insist on some policies that can be brought down to the device, and that we can manage some basic systems on them. Of course, some people do get a little upset when you remotely wipe their device and there go their pictures and their music, and therein lies the conflict between the personal and the corporate device. I think for sure that we're probably more in the COPE situation, where the company is sponsoring the device and the user is managing it. They're loading whatever apps they want. We do not deny nor restrict them from doing so, We just do ask that if they are syncing specifically with ActiveSync today, that they do comply with the policies that we're pushing down. And again, very basic set of policies.
I'll add, we're kind of neutral because we're the standalone app that is sort of being self-adopted in both scenarios, whether a COPE environment, BYOD environment, or just a consumer device. But we do get occasional calls from CIOs who ask, hey, Tempo, we want to get this running within our organization. What can we do? There's a firewall. And usually what it comes down to is data. So I know there's a lot of focus around the device, but it's really the MAM side of it, so sort of more the application management as opposed to the device management. What I have found in talking to these CIOs, there's sort of two categories that, again, this is a very limited domain experience, but either they're extremely protectionist, so they sort of come across sort of this mindset of we're completely managed, it's like COPE++, and we don't want to allow any sort of third-party applications looking at any enterprise data, or we've recognized that we need to work with the Evernotes and the Dropboxes, and we already use Salesforce, and we already use GitHub, and we already use Jira in the cloud and other sorts of tools, that this is a trend that's happening. Let me figure out how to make it work. So those are sort of the two camps that we see. It's heavily sector specific, so government, health versus, we had a call from the royal family, mayors, staff. So certainly sector specific, but I think the device itself is sort of phase one. I think really the bigger question is the control around the data, and then how do you enable trusted third parties to access enterprise data while allowing your customers, allowing your employees to have the best user experience they can. And so that's always sort of in contention. You can create whitelists, but it's a lot of work. So how do you do it in sort of an organic way? And I think that's still being figured out.
Yeah, good points all. I mean, one of the points about bring your own device and enabling it is that I see is that it's critical for businesses today because everyone expects their employees to be on 24/7, and you have to have work-life balance. So if you can't use your personal devices in order to access work systems, you're not only not doing what your employees want, you're making your company less productive than your competitors. So you really need to adjust and embrace to how the world is changing towards these new models. I also think there's a difference between newer companies versus older companies, where older companies that have grown up around the legacy PC model, where you're really moving towards where they manage devices, single device that encapsulated the PC and your desktop, that was your whole work life. And now we're moving more towards these soft managements around user identity, around applications, and around data. And I see that on newer firms where they don't have that, I don't really want to call it baggage, but that is kind of the appropriate word, that they're more amenable to pure cloud models. Okay, pure bring your own. Where more established firms need a hybrid solution.
Well, and I think age is a big influencer too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a weird way, like if you just think like Facebook is kind of private as compared to Instagram, because Instagram is always public, you can follow anyone, and how sharing content I don't think anyone under the age of 25 even thinks about privacy around their Instagram photos, and it's all family, and so I think that's going to translate into the next generation of startups.
Great point. So let's talk a little bit about the mix of devices in the industry. So analysts seem to report, and I'll let Chris comment on this, that somewhere around the neighborhood of 70% of the market is Android. Yet when I talk to enterprise customers, enterprise interest seems to all be moving from BlackBerry to iOS and Apple. So what are folks seeing as far as prevalence of devices? Is it a two-horse race? Mm-hmm. What are the differences in dynamics? What else did everyone see?
Yeah, I definitely think there is a kind of a gravitation towards iOS and Android in the enterprise. There still is a pretty healthy contingent of companies that are reliant on BlackBerry, but for the most part that's BlackBerry 7, so it's still very much email and PIM through their BES infrastructure. We've been tracking BlackBerry for 7 years, and we've seen a gradual decline since 2008 in the number of companies that are planning to buy BlackBerry. There have been two quarterly upticks of about 1% to 2% with the launch of BlackBerry 10. But then after that, we're not expecting any major increases because we don't see any follow-on devices that are going to be having the market impact of Z10 for quite a while. Speaking to Android, we are very bullish on Android in the enterprise. Still, iOS is in the U.S. is the leading OS now in the enterprise with 61% of companies plan. And this is corporate level, so this doesn't even speak to BYOD, where it's a big contingent of what's coming into the enterprise. But 61% of companies are buying iPhone for their employees. That compares with 41% for Android. And then 33% for BlackBerry, and that's on a gradual decline. And then Windows Phone 8, we're seeing that as around 11%, and that's actually doubled in the last 6 months. So you're seeing some interest in Windows Phone 8. Interesting, I guess one of the panels earlier today has talked about pretty fast adoption of Android. I think they said of 25,000 devices coming in, it was the Zendesk panel, 25,000 devices coming in, more Android for the first time since they've been measuring that. So I think things that, concerns around Android are valid, but there are tools in place to take it, to control that. So.
Raj, what do you see from as far as both activations for your app and demand and profitability on some of the other platforms? I think you're in a good position to comment on this.
Yeah, so we're not available on Android yet, so there's a little bit of bias, but I'll tell you why we chose iPhone first. So a year and a half ago, we were deciding whether we should go Android or iPhone first, and there's a lot of advantages to Android as a developer, from the standpoint of just being able to write in Java. You can develop your app a little bit faster. It's a little bit more open. I mean, certainly you have more testing that you have to deal with and different screen sizes. But what we did was we soft surveyed a few different CRM companies, and we actually had asked them what was the ratio of iPhone to Android amongst their workforce that they had sold their CRM software into, and it was like 4-to-1, 5-to-1. We were hearing ranges like that. Now this was a year and a half ago to 2 years ago sort of data, but that's a pretty significant ratio in terms of iOS versus Android. Now, as we started kind of going down this path, we anecdotally concluded, and this could be totally wrong, that managers and above tended to have iPhone and individual contributors tended to have Android. And so I don't think it's a fact, but it was sort of what we were seeing in our analysis when we were looking. And what was interesting in the context of building a calendar application, that was an important metric to us because we're kind of going after an audience that has a lot of meetings. And so meetings tend to correspond with non-individual contributors. So all that aside, I'd say our number one requested feature is to come to Android in terms of what users are asking for. But hands down, our number two requested feature is to come to the iOS tablet. So it's interesting kind of balancing that, and should we go more vertical or more horizontal?
Excellent. Suzanne, what do you do at Columbia Sportswear? What do you allow for devices?
What do we allow?
What's the mix?
We allow it all, and much to our chagrin, we allow it all. But I'd say of the 1,200 or so devices that we have corporately deployed, about 90% of those are iOS today. We do have some Android users, and we also do have some Windows users. We find we have some Windows specifically in Asia for some reason. Hong Kong, Vietnam, it's a little bit higher adoption rate than it is here in the US. I think in North America we see a Windows phone. Mostly people are trying it, and typically they'll go back to an iOS device. We do see the trend that our executives are highly involved in an Apple device. And let's face it, if it's new and it comes out and it's sexy, they want it. So that's where it is. The Android devices all over the place, and as I mentioned, typically that could be anyone who just doesn't really enjoy the Apple experience and they want anything but, or it could be some real hardcore Droid user. For example, on my team, I have a team of 10, 9 out of 10 use an Apple 5. and I have one guy using an Android device. And that is a pretty good statistic for the rest of the company as well. We see a huge trend for iOS.
One of my former colleagues coined a term that I have to bring up to end this section of the thing, which is that bring your own devices, enabling your employees to use whatever device makes them look youngest. So let's move on a little bit from the hardware and the devices themselves to what you do with it and what you manage. There's a slogan that's been prevalent here at this conference that I heard before around mobile first, okay? And differences in viewpoints around consuming apps on all flavors of devices. At VMware, we very much see this as a mixed environment. You need to support Windows and native Mac, you need desktops, you need laptops, and you need to deliver the content, mobile applications to smartphones and tablets so people can be productive on the road and be productive where they are in context with their devices. And that's what a lot of our product development has been around. I'd like to ask the panel on how they see managing all of these things, okay? Discussion about policies and device management, and then we'll delve into the MDM versus MAM topic. Susan, you want to start on this one?
I can try. This one's probably a little bit more out of my comfort zone. Specifically, Columbia does not develop today for mobile first. We're still very much in that legacy environment where we're developing for the PC, for the fat client, for the users, for a client-server type environment. And that's mostly what I do and what I concentrate on. We are seeing, however, the new demand with new recruits, new employees coming in. They want whatever device it is that they want. It's very subjective. It's what makes them happy. It's what makes them more productive. And my job is to allow them to be productive and enable them to use whatever device they want. And so I've said it in the past, what I am more concerned in now, today, rather than saying you get a PC, you get a Mac, you get an Apple phone, is you get the device that you need to do your job, and I'm going to enable the delivery of the applications that you need to do your job across whatever device you choose. So from a corporate enterprise standpoint, we're taking a step back, and rather than trying to regulate the device that people are going to use or need to use, saying, what device do you think will make you be the most effective and most productive worker? What's going to make you happy? What's going to keep you as an employee? And then allowing me to deliver that device. And one of the tools that's allowing us to do that today is, of course, the Horizon Suite. Some of the HTML5 stuff that's coming out, super cool. We can go ahead and package those applications. We can deliver them down to whatever device that person's holding or wants to hold. So we're really excited about it. We're very much in the early pilot days, but we see huge potential for even delivering something like SAP client down to an iPad, and so that I can enable our users, our supply chain users, to go out there, even our salespeople, and use the device at a customer location. And that's really what it's about for me. So we can get caught up in the hardware, and the hardware is exciting and it can be cool, but at the same time, really what we're looking to do is just enable the worker.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. Chris?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's as Suzanne was talking about. I mean, there's and Scott, there's the device, there's the applications, there's the data, and there's the user, and those are things that IT needs to be concerned about. All of those. We've been looking at this the enterprise mobility management space for a couple of years, and the last few years there's been a lot of excitement and market hoopla around mobile device management, and we saw that as and the market sees it as a very good way of kind of provisioning applications, provisioning email, provisioning access point, provisioning VPNs, and now provisioning app stores. But there's a little bit of pushback from employees in terms of, this is my device. I don't want you doing inventory of all the applications that I have on the device. I don't want IT to have a visibility into where I am outside of work hours. So MDM is a tool that's very good for provisioning the device, but there are limitations and concerns around privacy, and so that then kind of leads us into mobile application management and wanting to focus on managing the app, and then the emphasis around that is managing the data. What data is going through that application, what data is being stored on that device. That was a question that came up earlier today about how much data should be resident on that device. Obviously not much, because it is a device that can be lost pretty easily. And then one that's starting to become more and more important is managing, so I talked about the device, applications, and data, but also the user. So a lot of enterprise mobility management companies are pricing by device. But a lot of you probably have 3 or more devices. So you have the tablet, you have a smartphone, you have your laptop, you may have another smartphone. And so for a company that is looking to manage some aspect of all those devices, it's easier to manage the user and understand what the user priorities are, rather than this device has these policies and these applications. It really should be more the user.
I'm going to talk about the mobile first aspect of the question. So there's a stat that we measure in Tempo to kind of track to what extent is this sort of happening. So we look at the ratio between clicking of events and adding of events. So we look to see how many events do you add through your phone. And that has been systematically climbing every single month on a per user basis, which is really fascinating, because it's indicative to us that people are creating their events through the phone, which wasn't something that we necessarily anticipated. When we had originally hypothesized the value proposition around Tempo, which was very much around opening up an event and taking action, we thought all the event creation would actually happen at your desktop, since it's really painful to do text entry. But we're seeing that transition, and the trend line is certainly heading towards the direction of maybe the whole calendar is managed from your mobile device. So I'm definitely of the camp that absolutely mobile first, and to me it's sort of it's really just a matter of time. Certainly you need a keyboard as an input method, but I don't care what the screen size is. If you could just move your keyboard around, then that's fine. And there's a lot of advantages when you think about mobile first, or at least ignore mobile first for a second and just think about designing for the smallest screen. So maybe your watch, or maybe a Google Glass device, and then going to the next. We used to call these, when I used to work in the mobile browser space, game of inches. So like 2-inch screens, 3-inch screens, 4-inch screens, 5-inch screens. So designed for the smallest screen, and it really forces you to be very sort of use case driven, be very particular about it's very, very sort of tight workflow, very tight sort of user experience. And so it becomes a lot easier to adapt as you go to a larger and larger screen. The other thing that I think is really powerful with respect to at least mobile devices is context. And it's something that the desktop has a little bit of it in terms of, it knows if you're present, and maybe they could use the webcam for some clever things, but mobile knows your location. People talk about always on, but I like to say always in your pocket. So it's always with you. And so it has all these different sensors and signals, and one of the things that we evangelize internally is context is really, it's not a category, it's a layer. So the analog I used to say was that LBS used to be a category. I don't know if you remember in the Sprint App Store, the Verizon App Store in like 2007. But now every application benefits from LBS. We're seeing the exact same trend happen with context. Sort of assistance is sort of new layer, and that's one of the benefits that comes out of being mobile first, is you can take advantage of that and be more anticipatory, proactive, leverage that to just simplify your life. So I think there's a lot of advantages to going mobile first.
That's a real good point, Raj. One of the things I wanted to talk about that I'm starting to see is that mobile first, although it's a heterogeneous world, and you have to definitely come back to this, you have to worry about all of these platforms. But one of the key differences around mobile and mobile first, to me, is that there's new inputs that we didn't have before. It's not just text inputs. If you think about workflows and what people can do with these mobile devices, Camera input is a huge differentiator. Speech input is a huge differentiator. GPS is a huge differentiator. Location of where you are with the device. And these enable automation and workflows that we never could have before. I have a couple examples, and I'd like to hear some other examples here. I heard about various county governments where they're now, when they go out and they start examining roads, okay, what they're doing is using smartphones or tablets, taking pictures of potholes, and those are uploaded automatically with the GPS coordinates of where it is. That's a big difference from going around with pen and paper, having to take manual photos, and then going back to the shop and typing it into some database, okay? Big difference, okay, in what you can do. Another example is doing maintenance on things in the field. I've heard about apps where they're using QR scans or barcode scans on parts out in the field that then look up database records in the back office of what the maintenance schedule is for the parts, okay? Another thing where you can more speedily improve workflows and improve profitability or shrink and lower costs. Are folks also seeing things like this, of new ways, new workflows that are enabled when you start thinking about mobile first?
Yep. So I guess just to comment on continue my path of answering the wrong question, but just kidding. So I think the one thing that I'd like to point out about the barrier to entry. I mean, everybody is walking around with these mobile devices, particularly more and more tablets in the enterprise, and that barrier is the entry of text, but then with a camera and with the sensors, you're able to kind of associate yourself with a location and with things in that location, like inventory or other items that are critical to that business process. And I think what's going to kind of drive additional or additionally reduce that barrier for inputting information into say a tablet or a touchscreen device is machine to machine. So you have a lot more devices that are connected to the Internet of Things, and so that you're able to quickly identify those items, first through a camera, but then also through self-identification of those devices for what's around you. And I think that's pretty powerful. And we see kind of the Internet of Things as this kind of trifecta of the data center, which will control the inventory and where everything is, and the applications that are running through that system. But then you have the user with a mobile device, and then you have the sensors themselves. And I think that those three pieces are going to be pretty critical to any future mobile process or any business process that is mobilized. And so that you have the user, the data center, and the sensor.
Great. Any other comments on this?
I think, I see the future for our retail business. Columbia Sportswear is primarily wholesale. We do have about 20% of our business on the retail side. And this could be our new point of sale, a tablet, for example, as well as it could be out with our salespeople. It could be doing visual retailing. It could be doing modeling. It could be doing, basic retail setup, staging type events for our customers as well. So we really do see the mobile device coming into play, and not just to show pretty pictures, but to also kind of enable the workflow that's required when someone's out in the field. And I really do think this is going to be, someday you're going to be coming off a trailhead and or getting on a trailhead for a marathon, and you're going to be able to buy a Columbia jacket or a Columbia hat right there. And I think this is the device that's going to enable it.
Excellent. So one of the other aspects that we've touched on here a little bit is the differences between device management, app management, content management, and all of these have their place, is what we see. And but very much it's a heterogeneous world, and so one of the things VMware very much believes in is that we need to move away from managing physical devices, especially when it's employee-owned devices, and we care about managing the user's business identity, the applications that are for the business, not for their personal use, and most importantly, the data that's associated with those applications, preventing data leakage and things like that. But at the same time, you can't be locking people down because there's a will, there's a way. Users are more and more sophisticated, and they're going to use consumer services if those provide a better way to get your work done. And so there's this big trade-off between enabling both. People agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've gone through several iterations of what's enterprise Dropbox, right? What's the next thing? And I'm a big believer that we want to keep the data with the application. So again, going to that mobile first, which from my perspective, again, is delivering the application, the business application, to an end user device, and then being able to kind of control that delivery and the data with that application. So we're centrally managing it, but we're making it available to our end users, and that's kind of, I think, what's so exciting about the Horizon data piece, the Horizon app, and the portal concept around delivering applications with data, but still managing them inside the data center.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, I mean, Horizon Workspace, I haven't been...
Sorry, I wasn't trying to plug the VMware stuff, but I have drunk the Kool-Aid a little bit.
Yeah, so Horizon Workspace is one of the solutions as part of our Horizon suite. It's an enterprise catalog that manages your identity with single sign-on across multiple services, has heterogeneous catalog of applications. We actually live on it at VMware today. And it has a data component that delivers functionality around being able to do sync service between all of your devices with the data stored on-prem. So you have enterprise security associated with that content. So it's a collection of these capabilities that are needed for this multi-device workspace today. Now, when people say consumerization of IT, I have a little illustrative story that I like to share about true story that happened to me at VMware, and it really illustrates this space, which is very important for IT today. So consumerization of IT, contrary to just the buzzword, doesn't mean willy-nilly letting your employees use whatever is out there. But we have savvy employees today, and if they have a better way to get their work done, they're going to do it. And it's up to IT to be able to provide the right tools for people to get the jobs done. So one of my prior GM used to like to use me as an example. He'd say, hey, I asked my CTO to give me his slide decks. So he sends me a link to Dropbox. What's that all about? Well, I didn't just start using Dropbox for enterprise usage, okay? Yep, I talk all over the world, and yeah, I have great slide decks. And with great slide decks come large PowerPoint files, with great pictures. And I get asked for these decks all over the world. And VMware IT has a quota, like many companies do, on how large an attachment you can have with email. So typically my emails would get bounced back because it was too big to send out. So I didn't just start using an alternative. I did what any good CTO would do. I filed a Helpzilla ticket with our IT department. I got two very interesting responses. I kid you not, this is true. First response I got back suggested that maybe I ought to delete some content. So I was like, oh good, I'll delete the roadmaps before I send the decks out. Customers will like that. Then the second suggestion, when that went over like the proverbial lead balloon, was that the suggestion was maybe I should buy a bag full of USB keys and send them out in the mail. Now, I thought about it for about 20 seconds and decided, hey, the bandwidth is actually pretty good, but the latency is going to kill you, okay? That's when I started using Dropbox. Now, yes, this is a funny story, and yes, it's true, but it gets to the heart of the matter of what consumerization of IT is all about and what's going on in companies worldwide every day. I had a completely legitimate business need, okay? I asked for IT for a way to accomplish that business need. I was not helped, so I worked around them in order to get my job done instead of not getting my job done. That's what consumerization is all about, and that's what's going on all over. And enterprises need to embrace this mobile era, this era of new services. Somebody here used the term, bring your own service instead of bring your own device, and I think that's a good analogy. There's a lot out there, and people are going to be most productive to get their work done, and it's up to IT to embrace these changes. Do folks see this similarly?
Chris, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were just talking earlier, and there are a lot of IT shops that are, they understand that there are a lot of devices out there that are coming online that they need to test and support, and you talked about kind of testing and breaking devices.
Yes.
And so I think there is a new mentality within IT that these are your customers, these are your employees that you need to make productive, and I think the IT shop that is rigid and provides the answers that people don't want to hear are going to drive people to do things that are unsecure. And a mobile device is less visible to IT physically and digitally in most cases than a laptop or desktop. And so by pushing people to do the wrong thing on a mobile device that in many cases may be less secure is going to be even more dangerous. So it's very important that IT understand what people are doing on their mobile devices and provide that leeway, but also provide flexible tools so that they can use native or web, depending on what that employee needs at their time, because you've probably experienced this where you're out and you're in the field and you need corporate data and you may need to edit it, at least view it and present it. And if you can't get access to it at that time, that critical time, that can be pretty damaging. And so it can be frustrating to the employee. And so they're going to do things that allow them to enable them to do their job and be successful in their job. And IT needs to be there to help them and be flexible to help them. So.
Raj, you must have run into this scenario around data and data protection with your application. How does that resonate?
So we get asked the question. So we're on the other side of the spectrum. How secure is Tempo? Can I let my employees use it? There's sort of, what I found is there's almost a checklist of questions that they seem to ask. I'm not at the point yet where I can completely pattern match all the questions, but I've been documenting them and kind of looking at like, okay, what are the same questions that they ask over and over again? And there's typical things like, are you storing any data? Is it encrypted? Is it encrypted through the pipe? Is there a VPN? Things like that. But it's funny how there is almost a order of operations of answers that you can provide to kind of deflect most of the questions in a kind of an A-B pyramid kind of way. We really care about data. Okay, well, what if we multi-tenant it in the Amazon cloud? So instead of you being commingled with everyone else, you'll get your own little cloud. Okay, that's okay. But then some are like, no, we don't like Amazon. Well, okay, then what if we do it on Rackspace? Okay, you don't like Rackspace. Okay, well, what if we do a deployed private cloud? So it's fascinating how you can kind of go through, it's almost like a customer support checklist, and you can map this out to a whole series of CIOs. And I'm still building this thing out, but for the same 20 or so questions, from least amount of work to most amount of work, and then where we, Tempo, want to play in that matrix. So we're not there yet. We're still figuring this out, but to me, it's an inevitability. It's like you got to use the best tools that you need to get stuff done, and there's just too much cost managing all this stuff on-prem. It doesn't make any sense. Let other people deal with servers and stuff like that. Always have the latest updates, etc. So it's just a question of inevitability and getting people comfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's inevitable. There's lots of change going on, and providing tools like the Horizon Suite that let IT manage and deliver compliance, but embrace all of this new work and these new services is really key. So we're almost out of time here. Should I open it up? Are there any questions from the audience that you'd like us to answer or discuss? Yes.
My name is Artem Patrick. I'm with IBM. And my team develops capabilities for IBM Inside Sales, which is Salesforce that delivers through IBM.com. Mm-hmm. So as the salespeople, it's about 3,500 users, user base. We find that their usage of devices basically splits 50-50 between Android and iPhone. Mm-hmm. iPhone in the US, Android everywhere else. We have limited budgets, so the capabilities that we build use a lot of phone gap. So we build hybrid apps which in the end does provide a little bit of a subpar user experience.
Yep.
Given the limitations that we have, we really don't see any other option. We can't really spend that much money building an iPhone, a specific app, and a native Android app separately. Do you see this being a trend going forward, or is there a better solution coming down the road?
I can comment a little on that, okay? I think we're definitely at a point in time where there's, different perspectives. I mean, HTML5 and the enhancements that were added to that standard were supposed to enable rich, more interactive apps, write once, run anywhere for a browser experience, okay? I think we heard in a lot of the panels this morning, I think some of them yesterday, and some of the larger consumer companies like Facebook and LinkedIn, I think, were mentioned here, okay? Oh, and also the CTO from Evernote also mentioned this in his panel, was talking about how they found HTML5 to be inadequate, not a good enough user experience. Hence, this platform diversity is rippling in, and you have people writing, custom apps to get the most out of each one of their devices. I don't think there's one be-all, end-all answer here. I will say that, VMware is certainly investing in a variety of technologies here. One of them is there's a capability that we invented for our View product around delivering Windows as a service, Windows applications as a service to tablets, called Unity Touch, where we actually, this came out of my team, and we actually are virtualizing the user interface to Windows. So we're dynamically changing the user interface of a point-and-click application into something that's more tablet or smartphone friendly, to be easier to use without modifying the application. But I think the jury's out. I think you're hitting on a very key point, which is, it's expensive to write native apps for each of these platforms. And at the moment, I think there's definitely a trade-off of, one size fits all, which of course is not going to be as rich an experience as you can get if you write dedicated to a different platform. Does anybody have other comments on the topic?
Do you get discounts using IBM technology to build the
We get
app?
technology for free, so we do use Worklight.
Yeah, Worklight, I was gonna say.
Phone
Yep.
gap is,
Yep.
it's basically phone gap, so it's
Okay.
it's basically the same.
Yeah.
I was going to add, I think it's going to get worse. I used to work in the mobile browser space, a company called Skyfire, now part of Opera. I was on the mobile HTML5 expert group for a while. The problem with standardization is everything starts looking the same. So there's a constant battle with the OEMs themselves to innovate and put innovation on top of standardization, and that's why you see TouchWiz trying to modify the Android UI on the phone, and HTC putting their own flavor of UI on top of default Android. And this is inevitable. It's not going to happen. It still happens even on the desktop of the browser through plugins. So you see plugins try to bridge some innovation gap. Even Google has now forked WebKit from sort of the WebKit open source community, and so I suspect they're going to start writing some custom stuff with it if you use the Google Chrome browser, and Microsoft with their sort of same approach with IE. So I just don't see it going away, and I think the better answer is not a question of is there another way to do it. It's really a question of, do you need to offer the best possible user experience on the device or not? And what I have found is internal apps have a lower bar in terms of UI and have a higher sort of pressure from cost standpoint versus apps that are third-party sold in. And then there's really a question, is it like a form-based app, or is it, what is the user experience? So you can design a user experience to do a very beautiful app through an accelerator or a phone gap. But coming back to what you said earlier, it depends. So I don't know, but I don't think it's going to get any better. I actually think it's going to get worse, and I've seen the cycle happen twice now over the last decade. Because in 2004, there was a bunch of porting tools available for the mobile game publishers, and then it repeated.
Yes.
Yeah, just general question. My name's Tom. I think we were talking about some of the summary of the panel that employees want to use their own device, and they want to use their own device. Assume they want to be more productive. So I think it's obvious they want calendar, they want email access. But any anecdotes of anything that employees are pushing that they've been using that they're finding to make them more productive that becomes shared with the organization and says, hey, this is a good idea. And Raj, I'm wondering, do people in enterprises find your calendaring app, do they start using it, and then all of a sudden the enterprise realizes that it's got 100 installs, 500 is whatever it's going to be, and then the organization says, I'm just trying to get a sense of, are employees going out and finding their own productivity apps, and are they bringing them to the attention of the enterprise? Have you seen any stories like that outside of the obvious stuff? Or is it still kind of early on?
So productivity apps in general are not viral. So there's a few examples that buck that trend, like a Dropbox or a file sharing sort of app, but for the most of the time they're individually. So I like to think of it as two kinds of apps. There's apps that are useful if everybody's using it, like a Yammer, not useful individually, or apps that are very useful individually. If you can be both, that's amazing. And there's very few examples of that. So calendar falls into this bucket where it's individually very useful, but in a group setting, there's not yet a lot of advantages if everybody's using the same calendar app, except maybe free busy sharing or something like that. So we've been plotting, and we have some graphs. I have them on my laptop, but we've been plotting the distribution of tempo internally within an organization over time. So we'll look at a domain of a particular user and been trying to find a viral pattern, and we're not. So we see what we see is there's no correlation to releases, which is really interesting, at least with our data. But there will be a moment somewhere in the graph where all of a sudden it just like 10 people adopt in the same week. You're like, okay, what happened there? And so clearly it's like somebody mentioned it on a call or sent an email out, or there was some quick in the room kind of, hey, check this out, this is what I'm using. But it's really fascinating. I just don't have enough data yet to answer because it's still too early. We've only been in market for a few months. But we are mapping it out. And I'm curious, the key thing for us is trying to take that back into potential viral features that we might bring into a calendar kind of application to see how that may affect the proliferation of an application through the enterprise.
I'll just add on there real quick. So I think I'm not aware of too many tools that will kind of help employees push suggestions to IT, but in terms of IT distributing applications, there are tools that allow employees to provide feedback, mirroring exactly what can happen in Apple's App Store or Google Play, where employees can rate the application, and those ratings and feedback are come back to IT or set within the organization. And then you also have analytical tools that allow by leveraging an SDK, when they're building an app, IT can have an app that provides statistics on how many people are using it, what they're using it for, are they having trouble kind of navigating through the app. So it's not so much kind of suggestions to what apps IT should use, but today it's very much kind of IT leveraging the user base to understand, okay, are these apps useful? Can you do your job with them?
So I think we're running a little over here. So in summary, I hope you enjoyed the panel here. It's a multi-device world. IT needs to embrace this mobile revolution that's going on, and change is just accelerating. I hope the panel was useful for you.